Alabama is back atop the college football playoff rankings as they look for a 17th national championship, including a 5th since Coach Nick Saban took over the program in 2007. We're going to discuss the season to date and the players to keep an eye on for the 2018 NFL Draft as we go one-on-one with Ryan Fowler, sports talk show host for Alabama football, with Tide 102.9 The Game in Tuscaloosa on the OFN meeting room with Greg DePalma. All right, it's November the 15th, 2017. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN meeting room as we talk Alabama football with Ryan Fowler. Ryan, thanks for talking to us today.
Hey, it's good to be on with you guys. Obviously looking forward to talking a little Alabama football, and we're beginning to really get to crunch time here in this final couple of weeks. Mercer, maybe not so much, but Auburn, what an epic Iron Bowl that will be coming up in a couple of weeks. So we're excited to be on with you guys. Thank you again for the invitation.
You know, we were talking off the air, strictly a coincidence that I was able to get you on the program. I had no idea that you and Dan Shanka had gone back as far as you have. Did you say 15 or 16 years?
All right, so I've been doing my claim to fame. You know, like some people have the fastest 40-yard dash, deep, okay? My claim to fame at Tuscaloosa is I am Tuscaloosa's longest-running sports show. Okay, I've been doing it longer than anybody as far as consecutive. And
awesome.
You look back, and so I've been doing it for quite a while. I've been on the radio since 2000 here, and Dan Shanka has been a guest as long as I can remember. I'm talking about 15, 16, obviously 17 years. Dan is our go-to guy. When we talk draft coverage, we always reach out to Dan Shanka, and we will pick up this, you know, beginning generally right between the middle part of the season, I guess, when you talk about SEC championship, leading into the college football playoffs, if Alabama's part of that. And then we will probably talk to him almost once a week here. And we just pick his brain about Alabama guys, and we talk about SEC guys, and because, you know, Alabama's been a big part of the draft. And we have to have sort of an expert that and he sent me a book last year. Wow, Lord. I mean, it might as well be written in a foreign language. I'm not able to understand all that, but it was fun to at least look at what he's able to do, and it's always fun to feature Dan Shanka from our lads.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we get into the players, because there is a long list of players that could be coming out this year from Alabama once again, let's talk about the team. How nervous were you covering the game on Saturday night, especially maybe you saw the score. Miami was beating Notre Dame, and Georgia was beaten, and they kept flashing up on ESPN. Well, the last time the top two ranked teams, or something like that, had lost, and then all of a sudden it was the last time the top three ranked teams, because you were thinking, well, maybe Alabama's going to lose too. So how nervous were you about that game that went down pretty much to the wire against Mississippi State?
Well, I was there, and it was a hostile environment. I know from a local perspective, Starkville takes a lot of jokes, and I want to kind of come clean with this a little bit. I've been part of that, too, because Starkville's such an easy target, and they call it Start in Vegas. You know, you're lucky to get out of there, and I'm talking about, you know, it's like one road in, one road out. But I must tell you, Starkville, Mississippi brought the heat. 61,000 fans. I don't know if I've ever heard that loud of 61,000. Now, they had some help with those artificial noisemakers, cowbells.
Those bells. Yep.
But it was as good of a college atmosphere as I have been to. I mean, it was really, it was solid. I mean, it was a lot of fun to go to. They made it, you know, hard for Alabama with those cowbells and communication, all the young players, the communication. If you would have stopped right now at the third quarter and you would have said, Ryan, what do you think? I would have really had a different opinion than what probably I'm going to share. I thought it was one of Nick Saban's worst performances as a head coach since 2007.
Wow.
Now, he had some games in 2007.
Okay.
But it just, if I would have stopped at the third quarter. But obviously, when you look at the fourth quarter and you tally that in, then you change adjectives and you begin to describe it as, hey, this was a great performance. They come back. They did this. They did that. Jalen Hurts answered a lot of questions. He's a gamer. And so you have a different opinion. So thankfully for Alabama fans, they played 4 quarters and not 3 quarters.
That's right.
Because 3 quarters, Mississippi State would have whipped them. And I thought, I've just never seen Alabama get whipped at the line of scrimmage the way they did. Mississippi State had a great game plan.
Well, what was it specifically that you were a little bit upset about or confused about that Alabama wasn't doing?
Well, I think it just goes back to defensive side of the football. I think the injuries finally caught up with Alabama. And when you look at all those linebackers, they had dropped so many in the few weeks, or really, all the way back to Florida State when they lost 2 that game, and actually they lost 4. So you lost Anthony Jennings, Rashawn Evans, Christian Miller, Terrell Lewis. He was Terrell Hall, now he's Terrell Lewis.
Oh,
and changed his last name going into the season. So when you lose 4 linebackers in one game, a couple of those guys were able to come back, but they have not been 100% healthy since like halfway through the first game. So when you look back, it finally caught up with Alabama, and I thought they just got whipped, from a more aggressive front 7 on the defensive side going against Alabama's offensive line. Now, Alabama did lose their left guard in that game, Ross Pierce-Baker, which is, I'm probably sure we're going to talk about him at some point. But left guard, Ross Pierce-Baker, went down what they're labeling now as a high ankle sprain.
Okay.
And is probably going to be out for a couple of weeks. J.C. Hassenauer came in and was able to fill that area there, did okay. But still, overall, as a unit, they got whipped. Then Mississippi State brought the heat. And blitzed Jalen Hurts and really brought more than they could even block. So Alabama's got to clean some of those things up. And then on the defensive side of the football, they gave up 3 rushing touchdowns. 3 rushing touchdowns.
That was surprising.
That has never happened since Nick Saban has been at Tuscaloosa. So that was, I guess I just wasn't accustomed to seeing Alabama give up so many rushing yards. They sort of play to a standard around here, and that was not one of those finest moments.
Yeah, every time they kept rushing the ball in the end zone, it did look kind of strange. It was like, I don't think I've seen that very often. So now, of course, the Auburn game coming up in a couple of weeks. What is it about this team this year? Because look, Dan and I talk an awful lot during the draft process the last couple of years about the infusion of all these underclassmen heading early to the NFL, and eventually you're going to start seeing it impact the college game. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit this year with I think there's just so much parity right now. You could pick a team that's probably ranked 12th or 11th right now in the standings, and they win the national championship. Okay, I could see that if there was a actual 12-team playoff. So what about this situation with this particular team that leads you to believe that they're going to be able to get it done when they play Auburn? Which is really going to be, you would think, the game that decides whether Alabama gets to the playoffs. Now, Ohio State didn't get to the Big Ten championship game last year, still made the playoffs, so anything's possible. But what leads you to believe that this particular group can get it done in 2 weeks?
Well, let me just put it point blank, and I'm sure you probably don't want to hear this from Tuscaloosa, but if Alabama plays the way they did against Mississippi State, and Auburn plays the way they did against Georgia,
I agree.
then Auburn's going to win the game.
Yep.
Auburn's going to win the game.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's not going to be very popular in Tuscaloosa, but I've also got to give the truth. When I look at Alabama, they've got to clean up some things on that line of scrimmage, defensively and offensively. They cannot get pushed around because I don't want to break it, Alabama fans, but Auburn's front 7 is better than Mississippi State's front 7.
Yeah.
And if they do not correct those issues, they will get beat down in Lee County.
All right. What do you like about this year's team over last year's team? Is there anything specifically that they're doing better than last year's team, or any particular players that have stood out even more than you thought that they would compared to last year?
Well, this is one of the most talented secondaries, I guess, that I've been able to follow here. They are doing some things, I'm trying to think, offensively a little bit different. I wasn't a huge fan of the jet sweeps, with the speed currently in SEC.
Yes.
That was something Lane Kiffin ran a ton of. I think some people call them jet sweeps, some people call them fly sweeps, but I think they're virtually the same thing. We talk about a wide receiver coming in motion and it's timed out perfect where, it's a handoff. Well, they actually label it as a pass. So it's like, about 3 or 4 inch pass. It's more of a, it's a toss. It's a
Okay.
toss up in the air, and the wide receiver never breaks stride. But going to that, maybe that was not a part of it. In some ways, Lane Kiffin was a brilliant play caller. But I'm not exactly sure how much of a developer he was in getting Jalen Hurts where he needed to be as a developer. I like what Brian Dable has been able to do. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than where Lane Kiffin. Obviously, that comes with experience, too, of just seeing more. Now, he's into, 23, 24 games, and you look at Jalen Hurts, he's making better decisions. He's keeping his eyes down the field. And where last year he would probably just tuck and run the football and never look for that second option. When he's running now, he's running, but he's also keeping his eyes down the field, which, kind of helps him a little bit, but it also has allowed for Alabama to have some explosive plays. So they're rotating a lot of running backs. There's really, Damian Harris, I guess, would be the bell cow, but it's close. I mean, they're handing off. They're not working these backs too much. Now, if Alabama's able to make it to college football playoffs, you would think that would pay off for the Crimson Tide because they're guys that probably only rushed maybe 100 times at the max, all their running backs. So when you look at that, they sort of give you a 1, 2, 3 punch. Josh Jacobs provided a little change of pace. But overall, pretty standard Nick Saban, defense, but I think he also needs credit from Jeremy Pruitt dealing with all these injuries, all these injuries on the defensive side of the football. He's still been able to maintain somewhat of a standard and keep Alabama at the top of most defensive statistics. I think that's the big part that I look at. We take it for granted that Nick Saban's always at the top, but when he loses all these players and still able to maintain that consistency, I think that's a big salute.
Well, let's start on the defense, and probably I would have to say, based on what I see from our lads, you're looking at several guys. Well, there's actually 4 guys at the top of every position on the latest our lads rankings. We've got, and of course, that's also available over at ourlads.com, and that's the latest draft preview brochure. We've got Deshaun Hamilton, number 1 for inside linebackers, senior inside linebackers. Anthony Everett, number 1 for senior corners. Minka Fitzpatrick is number 1 for underclass strong safeties, and Deron Payne is number 1 for underclass defensive tackles. Let's start with those guys. Who's got the highest ceiling out of those 4?
All right. You mentioned Sean Hamilton. Repeat them again. Anthony Everett.
Deshaun Hamilton, Anthony Everett, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Deron Payne.
All right. Well, let me also update you there with Sean Hamilton. I think you probably already know this.
Yeah.
He went down with a knee injury a couple of weeks ago, so he's out.
Is he out for the season, by the way? Is that it?
He is.
He is. Okay.
Yes, he is. Okay. And Sean Hamilton is a guy that is Kirby Smart, when he was here at Alabama. I'll never forget what he told us about Sean Hamilton. I'll share this with you. He said that he was the smartest football player he'd ever coached.
Wow.
That he just gets it a lot quicker than most. In other words, and he was the signal caller for Alabama. And so now Keith Holcomb has had to stand into that role with Rashaan Evans. But Sean Hamilton is, you will not find, as far as a better guy for that team. And I think going back to that Mississippi State game, you realize how much he was missed.
That's right.
In putting those guys in the right call. So even though Sean Hamilton was not on the field against Mississippi State, it's very obvious to see his loss.
Yep.
And his stock might have went up just because of the impact he was able to make. But I got to go to Minka Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
You're asking me for one guy to those guys. Minka Fitzpatrick is everything you want in a football player. He could play so many different positions. He could play the nickel. He could probably, if he really devoted his time to it, could probably play one of the corner spots. I know he could. Then when you look at safety, he can play both of those spots back there. They've even dropped him down at times into being one of those backers, being that sort of hybrid linebacker that you see in the college game. So Minka Fitzpatrick, Nick Saban had told us, and you talking about a guy that Nick Saban rides his players as hard as anybody. He demands excellence. And Minka's one of those guys that has a similar personality, according to Nick Saban, as he does. He's that same competitor as Nick Saban. So right there, I mean, that's what you look for. But he passes all the eye tests when you look at Minkah Fitzpatrick. You know, he's got a total of 44 tackles, okay? But he's all over the football field. He is literally, I mean, they're blitzing him. They're bringing him, you know, in different coverages. Now, he's had to deal with a little bit of a banged up, but overall, this guy's just, he's awesome to watch. And when you go to practice, it's the same way. He gives you everything he's got on that practice field the same way that he does on the game. Minkah Fitzpatrick is just an awesome guy, competitor, player, teammate, leader. I mean, any adjective that I can use to describe Minkah Fitzpatrick, that's who he is. And I'll never forget him arriving when Minkah Fitzpatrick walked out there. You know, some of those guys, he came in from St. Peter's Prep High School there in Old Bridge, New Jersey. And he was a guy that the first time I ever laid my eyes on Minkah Fitzpatrick, he passed the eye test. I'm like, this is not your typical freshman. You could see his makeup, his build, that this guy is going to be a playmaker. I just cannot listen, man. I could spend an hour talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, this guy is everything you're looking for in a defensive back, and he can play multiple positions, which will help him at the next level. I'm sure they'll probably try to lock him down at one area and let him become a specialist in that area. But because of Alabama's team, they've had to kind of, you know, move some guys around. Minkah Fitzpatrick has been that guy.
All right. So sounds like a top 5 pick to me.
Oh, I would listen. You could build a defense around this guy. He's that good.
Okay. What about some of these other guys on defense that we have rated here at our lads? Deshaun Hand is number 4 for senior defensive ends. Joshua Frazier is number 11 for senior defensive tackles. Rashaan Evans is number 5 for senior inside linebackers. Ronnie Harrison's number 2 for underclass free safeties. And Tony Brown is number 4 as a senior corner. Which of those players that you want to share with us, who do you like there?
And allow me to go back to Rashaan. The name just dropped. Anthony Avery is a guy that you talked about a couple of minutes ago. You mentioned his name. Anthony Avery is also another guy that really has played big for Alabama. When we talk about for the season, you know, he's right up there with Minkah as far as tackles. He's up there with about 35, but really because he's so good, he's not thrown to as much because, I mean, he's been a kind of a lockdown guy over there. Anthony Avery, this secondary, man, you're sitting there and thinking, this secondary is really, really awesome. Ronnie Harrison the same way. These guys almost, the way they play the game is very similar. And so you got one guy at the corner and a couple of safeties here that have just really, you know, been super players for Alabama. I had Antonio Langham on a couple of weeks ago.
Oh.
And Antonio Langham is a 2-time All-American here in Alabama and played in the NFL and probably one of Alabama's best defensive backs of all time. He said that Minkah Fitzpatrick may go down as Alabama's best defensive back, you know, probably ever. But, man, he's got a lot of competition back there with Ronnie Harrison and Anthony Avery. And I noticed you mentioned Rashaan Evans. Rashaan Evans has battled a little bit of a growing injury, but when he's out there, he's all over the football field. And I noticed him on Mississippi State taking up the slack. He was not the tackle leader. I think he was one shy of that for Saturday's game against Mississippi State. But Rashaan Evans was flying all over that football field, you know, really giving everything he had. But Rashaan Evans is, I think this groin injury, now you got to remember now, the groin injury happened in the first game. He missed a couple of games. Keith Holcomb had to step in there for him for there. So his stats are going to be a little bit misleading. But I think he's everything that you're looking for in a linebacker. I'm not exactly sure where he would be projected because of maybe some of the injuries. But when you step back and take a look at Rashaan Evans, he's been patient. He's been a great team player because other guys like Reggie Ragland, Reuben Foster have sort of been in his in front of him.
Okay.
But at the NFL level, he's one of these guys that creates a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I wonder if they'll use him more as an outside backer in some of those 3-4 schemes to be more of a pass rusher, because I think he has a chance just focusing on that to probably be an elite guy at that pass rush. Now, it hasn't showed up as far stat-wise, but you can see his first step is pretty, pretty remarkable. But they've had to keep him inside quite a bit because of all the injuries at the different spots of linebackers. So Rashaan Evans is a super player, always got a great personality, always got a smile, and he's also one of those leaders on the defensive side of the football.
It sounds to me that like in years past, if you're going to beat Alabama, you got to beat them with a quarterback and a passing game. Now it sounds to me, is that different now? Especially with the injury situation with Hamilton, Deion Hamilton, that maybe if you're going to beat Alabama, you might need to run the ball?
Well, that's something that it's kind of funny that you brought that up, because it's something that we've been discussing here with a couple of the media guys. We've been talking about, when you look at Alabama, they're more geared, I guess, to stop the spread and that, that mobile quarterback.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe not as physical, but you think about the defensive linemen that they've lost in the last few years. You want to go to Jaron Reed, Ashawn Robinson, Jonathan Allen. You look at these big run-stopping linebackers like Ryan Anderson and obviously Reuben Foster. They miss a lot of those guys, and they would probably be in a lot better shape if those guys were still around.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Defensively, they've sort of changed schemes. I mean, Deron Payne is one of the very dominant defensive linemen. But they've got some younger guys that are still in development that I'm sure that we'll be talking about 2 or 3 years down the road. But they really don't have a lot of guys that can occupy multiple blocks like they've done in the past.
Okay. Let's flip over to the offense. And I think we saw just how important Calvin Ridley is to this offense in the game against Mississippi State. How do you compare Ridley to Amari Cooper?
Well, he's certainly different than Amari Cooper. I think his routes are not as precise as Amari Cooper was, but he's got great hands. He's got great speed. And this is the one thing, when you compare him to other receivers, his stats are not going to show up, because you got to keep in mind, for 2 years, they started a true freshman quarterback. Obviously, then he was a true sophomore. And one of the games that has been slow to come around is throwing the football, reading those. And because Alabama relies so much on that rushing attack, they haven't been able to get him as many touches, I'm sure, as he would probably like. And really, when I say touches, like touches where, a quarterback is throwing him open and he can get, more yardage or being able to add more to his stats. So Calvin Ridley has been that guy that probably would be a more productive player if maybe you're not breaking in a quarterback
Sure.
like they have for the last 2 years. So I hope that's something that I'm sure NFL teams are going to consider. He's going to test well. He's going to give you everything that you're looking for, in a wide receiver. And I've always enjoyed conversations with Calvin Ridley. He's always been a really outstanding individual. But I think the stats probably are a little bit misleading, and you have to take into consideration that when you back up a little bit, you look at his numbers. I was going to look at them real quick. What does he have? 49 receptions for 755 yards. Only 2 touchdowns, though. And I think that's a lot. Is he gets the extra looks from the secondary, but also he just probably hasn't had the throws to really add up and accumulate more yardage.
Yeah, and of course, back when Amari Cooper was there in his final year in 2014, he had Blake Sims, and they were throwing the ball, and that's when he had his 1,700-yard, 16-touchdown season. So a little bit different way that you can kind of judge these guys, but nonetheless, as important a player though for Alabama, and maybe even more so, right? Because there aren't a plethora of skill position options on offense as much as we see the talent on defense. And so if you're an opposing team, you got to try to stop Ridley. If you can stop Ridley, you're gonna be in good shape, aren't you?
Well, and you've also got to look at this. The other wide receivers are all young guys except Cam Sims and Robert Foster. Cam Sims plays some, Robert Foster not so much. Jerry Jeudy, true freshman. Henry Ruggs, true freshman. Devontae Smith, who caught the touchdown, true freshman. When you look at these guys, he's had to kind of be that alpha dog in that room.
Yeah.
And if you know Calvin, he's not that. He's more of an action guy, lead with an example rather than voice. So he's had to, kind of be that, that guy in the wide receiver room. And
okay.
My understanding is he's done a pretty solid job of it.
Now, the two running backs are both juniors, Scarborough and Harris. They rank 4 and 5 as underclass running backs right now. Who do you think has a better chance of being? Well, who out of those two running backs, who do you think is going to wind up maybe more successful pro?
Well, I think it's all depends on what scheme they get into. But Damian Harris is a guy that's really showed me a lot. He had 1,000 yards last year, and really wasn't the conversation coming in. When you look at Damian Harris, I mean, it was more about the other backs, and he's answered that. I mean, look at his average, 8.4 yard average. He has 11 touchdowns. He's a guy that has the breakaway speed to be able to, add more yardage. He had 98 carries and 828 yards. So when you look at Damian Harris, he's been a very dependable guy for Alabama, not just this year, but last year he was 1,000-yard back. And that's hard to do with so much talent at Alabama. I know Derrick Henry did it a couple of years ago with 395 carries that Heisman season. But you look at Damian Harris, 98 rushes, 828 yards, and he's got when you look at 8.4 yard average and 11 touchdowns, he's been able to get the job done from that position. If you put a gun to my head, I'd probably say Damian Harris, but I'm not going to give up on Bo as well. I think Bo's got some athletic ability. I don't know if he's probably going to go pro yet. Who knows? But I would expect Damian Harris would heavily consider the NFL. Well,
what really we're probably going to have these scouts salivating has got to be Scarborough's size. I mean, that is something you can't teach, and that is going to definitely give him a leg up when these teams are drafting running backs. No question. The guy is, what is he? Is he about 6'2", 230? Is that about what he is?
He's lost a little bit of weight. He was up in the 240 range.
He was. Wow.
And so now they list him in about 230, 233, 6'2", and he's put together. I mean, he's chiseled from granite, man. He looks like that guy. So super looking football player.
If you had a guess, the players, are there any players out of the juniors that you have a good feeling either way, whether they're going to stay or go?
It's so hard to guess, but obviously you would think Minkah Fitzpatrick would be out of here. That would be one. You begin to, some of these guys that are going to be top 10 picks, I would almost expect, them to be out of here. I would expect Damian Harris just because of the position. I think he would probably be out of here. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to hold these guys back. So when you think about it, Deshaun Hand's a guy that you mentioned, but he battled an injury. He's a senior. He's out of here. Going through the list, I'm just trying to think of guys that I think that would be, out of here. Ronnie Harrison, obviously, he's probably, I could probably make the decision for him.
What about Ridley?
Yes, I would say he's out.
Okay.
I'd be shocked that he would return.
And again, this is
my opinion.
No, sure, I get it. And this is what, and look, most of them do go, and this is why. It is the day and age of college football. A lot of these really talented, the most talented players don't go 4 years, and in a year after year after year this happens. Sooner or later, it catches up to you, and just look what you mentioned about some of these players that if they hadn't gone early to the NFL draft, they were still on this team. Just how dominant this Alabama team could be, and they're already, of course, the number one team right now as far as the rankings are concerned. Bozeman, the top rated lineman right now at our lads, number 9 for senior centers. Any other linemen we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think for the future, you certainly want to keep your eye on Jonah Williams. But, he's a couple of years away. So he was a freshman last year. He's sophomore this year. I guess that might be a consideration for next year,
Okay.
left tackle. But Bradley Bozeman is probably the only guy that I can think of right now. Ross Pierce-Baker, I don't know where you guys have him rated as far as a guard. But at times he's had good production, and then at times, maybe not so much.
Okay.
But that would probably be a couple of guys. But really, I would focus on when I look at Bradley Bozeman. I mean, he's been a pretty special player when you look at what he's been able to do with that center position. And he's a big guy. He's not your typical center. I mean, he's a pretty big monster there.
Okay. A couple more things before I let you go, Ryan, and that is, what do you think about the job Kirby Smart's done at Georgia?
I think the jury's still out because I didn't believe in this Georgia team. I looked at what Alabama is. I looked at what Auburn was bringing into this game, and Kirby Smart. I think the jury's still out. You got to remember, it's not about going to Atlanta for them. It's not going to Atlanta winning. It's about going to the college football playoffs. And they had a guy that would take them to Atlanta. He just never won it. And so Georgia, they have some issues. I think Kirby Smart will be a solid coach at some point. But he got out coached Saturday against Auburn.
Yep. All right. And what do you think about the Tennessee and the Florida openings?
Wow. You look at Florida, if I was a coach that wanted to be in charge, that would kind of scare me a little bit. You got Steve Spurrier down the hallway. You got Jeremy Foley down the hallway as what is athletic director emeritus. Then you've got your true athletic director in Scott Strickland. My understanding is that was some of the problems that Jim McElwain had there in Gainesville. That would probably scare me away. If I was a coach that wanted to be in charge, that would probably move me the other direction.
Have you? I'm hearing Chip Kelly rumors. Is that accurate?
Man, I have no clue.
Okay.
Dial it in with Alabama. I hear those rumors too.
Yeah, that's what
rumors. I don't know a lot to bring to that table, but not really glued into that athletic department like I am here in Tuscaloosa. Tennessee, you hear John Gruden, but I think that's more of a fantasy than it is anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a program that really does need somebody because it's too good of a program. They just haven't been able to take off.
Yeah, no, you're right. I've got to jump on a Nick Saban press conference.
Okay, Ryan. No, I appreciate it. Absolutely. And I will look forward to talking to you again in a few weeks. Hopefully, especially if all things go well, whether Alabama beats Auburn or not, maybe they'll still be in the playoffs. So we look forward to talking to you again several times here leading up to the draft and maybe the playoffs.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on and talk about it. And next time we got to talk about J.K. Scott. Alabama's got a great punter.
That's right. You got it.
So I know we skip over the punter, but we got to give him some love. Hey, I always enjoy the conversation. Thank you again.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, that's Ryan Fowler. And, yeah, J.K. Scott, by the way, is the number 3 punter right now for our lads. Number 3, senior punters, J.K. Scott. All right, so we were all ready for that one. But, we did go overtime there with Ryan. A lot to talk about with Alabama. I mean, there's more players to talk about in Alabama. This is the longest one-on-one interview I've done because there's more players to talk about here than any other program, and I think we got through as many of them as we could. So we hope you were able to digest all of that, and we'll definitely get Ryan on again, depending, of course, on how things go the rest of the season. But for sure, before the 2018 NFL draft, but that Auburn game, I think I even said exactly what Ryan said, pretty close to what Ryan said regarding the Auburn game. That if Alabama, if they don't step it up, and Auburn, and that just wasn't a one-game deal for Auburn, and they just continue to play like that at that level, and Alabama's got to move. Even if Alabama moves up a level, That is going to be a tough football game. Very tough football game. To tell you the truth, I don't know. I don't know if Alabama steps up. As long as Auburn stays at that level, I don't know if Alabama can beat them. I don't know. So it's on the road. Um, the talent level is just not where it was last year with Alabama. Players graduating or defecting early and the injuries. It's just the way it is. So, hey, when you're used to winning championships, though, you can get spoiled. And those Alabama fans, that's what they expect. And hey, that's a good thing when you're expecting to win championships. That's what every fan dreams of, is having a program in college football that you expect national championships. And that's what's going on in Alabama. All right, so that is interview number 1 for today. If you're listening live, we are going to have, let's see, we're going to have 2 more today. 2 o'clock, we're going to be talking with Robert Gagliardi, senior sports editor and beat writer for Wyoming. So we'll talk about Josh Allen, and we'll talk about a Wyoming team that's playing a lot better at the end of the season as they were at the beginning of the season. So we'll talk to Robert in a few hours. We'll talk to Brian Matthews for you Alabama fans. Brian is a sports writer, covers Auburn for Rivals and Yahoo. So we're going to get the Auburn side of things coming up at 3 o'clock. And don't forget, tomorrow, actually it's Friday, we'll have Dave Matter talking Missouri football, another SEC team. So Dave Matter, Missouri Athletics beat writer for St. Louis Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com. And we will also have Ryan Abraham on our college football preview show. That's going to be Friday at 2. Ryan Abraham is the publisher of USCFootball.com as we talk about USC, Sam Darnold, and the big game with UCLA this week. And we preview the college football weekend. That is on OFN College Football Preview, 2 o'clock Eastern on Friday. So thanks for tuning in and checking back with us once again here on the Our Lads Football Radio Network's meeting room. For Ryan Fowler, thanks a lot for participating on the show. And we will see you again next time. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. And don't forget, the Our Lads Football Radio Network is where it's never too early to think about the NFL Draft.